All right, Apple Vision Pro is out. There were a lot of rumors leading up to it. Stock price went up leading up to it, and then they announced it. I think the reception has been kind of amazing, honestly, so far. That's my perception of, I haven't seen too many, I haven't like done an exhaustive survey, but what I've heard from people who've actually like tried it on, people are blown away by what they're seeing so far. But Tad,
Yeah.
curious, what's your take, and what are maybe not just your overall take, but what's your hot take? What's something some opinion you have about it that's maybe kind of controversial or different than what I don't know the public is saying?
Well, it's not necessarily controversial, but I think it's people don't realize how it works. Like that there's a strategy here. Everyone made
Hmm.
fun of the AirPods when it first came out, and everyone made fun of like all these different things, and AirPods are now like a huge portion of their revenue. So there's a playbook within Apple, and I think people underestimate them. They basically have a school, like a very like highly elite secret school, Apple University that normal people cannot even attend, and they train people almost like the CIA. They're probably better at keeping secrets than the CIA.
Hmm.
And you can ask anybody at Apple, like, "Oh, tell me about this project." And when I talk to someone I know at Apple, he's just he can't tell me because he
Yeah.
just doesn't know. And like they're
Yeah.
so good at it, so it becomes a system at this point. So they know how to like launch a consumer product that is actually good. They may
Hmm.
not be first, but they're the best.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think they've done it again here because
Yeah.
we saw what the concept was with Snapchat spectacles,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
there's all these deficiencies, right? It won't track the eyes. There would be all these different issues,
Yeah.
and even with Quest, with Meta's Quest Pro, uh,
Hmm.
you have to wear like you have to do like controllers and all this stuff, and people are just making fun of them. And Apple basically addressed all the issues. So
Yeah.
usually some other company does the inferior product, they do the better product, even though they're not first, and
Yeah.
their product is the one that everyone follows, which I
Yeah.
think is interesting. It's like a racer that lets the other people win for the first third of the race, and
Uh-huh.
then later on everybody's following you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Apple's been doing that over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, Apple's approach is, I would say, kind of different from like the typical advice you get in Silicon Valley, right? Like a lot of Silicon Valley, especially in the startup world, like you're kind of like, oh, like, like move fast, break things, like put something out there and it doesn't have to be great, but just, you need to validate the demand for it. So don't overinvest and put something like kind of sloppy out there. And if it's broke, like you'll know you have a great product when even though it's broken, people are still using it, and that's like you have great product market fit. And so it's okay to launch like half baked products because if you're really solving a really good problem, then like it's fine if your product isn't great. But Apple, they come out with the V1, their V1, it's like just like insanely good. And it's like they take a very different approach to just building product, and I think that comes from like when you have really strong, and Apple's really great at like having really strong conviction about the problems that they're solving. That hey, this is a real problem, and they have a really strong conviction about the best way to solve it. And then they just go like all in on that V1 release, and then it's like amazing because they've made the right trade offs
Yes.
in terms of like what is truly important to make this work well. Like Spectacles did their version. I would say their version is like I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. It's like a new like AR thing, but it yeah, they didn't really put in the effort to solve like the hardest problems that are the most meaningful problems as well. Which
Yeah.
Apple did with the Vision Pro.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Like they basically knew we can't release this thing unless these major problems are solved. So, like you were saying, it's a completely different mindset than typical in Silicon Valley. And I think in Silicon Valley, it's because it's all fed by VCs. They're just like, hey, keep like, we don't know what the right idea is, just keep throwing money at the wall, and then they
Mm,
eventually like it hits. And that's how the VCs work, but that may not be the best way. Like if you're a established leader company,
hmm.
you're not just throwing stuff at the wall and then hurting your brand all the time.
Hmm.
It's kind of like someone who knows that they're gonna win, and right when they enter the race, you know they're just gonna rock everybody, and
Yeah.
that's Apple's personality and Apple's style, and I really like it. It's like they they know, like they just
Yeah.
know that this is the best way, and
Yeah.
the good thing about it is that everybody else who did bad solutions, it in contrast, it's just obvious that it's so much better. And
Hmm.
sometimes the consumer doesn't even know what they want. Like they
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
even know that that's the best thing. So I
Hmm.
remember when the smartphone first came out, and everybody was still debating. There like
Hmm.
maybe like half. Like there half of the people were saying, "Well, I like the keyboard," and it was just like a common um, quiz. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, do you like the BlackBerry keyboard or not?" And then sometimes it would beat it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that just shows that the consumer does not know
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
in retrospect, after Uber is created, after all these apps are created where it's obvious that it should be a
Yeah.
full screen,
Yeah.
then everyone's like, oh, well, duh. But at that point,
Yeah.
Apple already won, right?
Yeah.
So
I
it's
felt
the
that
same
way.
same way, right?
Totally. Like one, like this is a small example, but one example of that I felt really, like everyone didn't like when Apple did they got rid of the headphone jack on their new phone or whatever,
Yeah,
and everyone was complaining like, oh, no headphone jack, no headphone jack. Google releases their Pixel and they're like advertising like, oh, and we have a headphone jack. And for me, I was like, dude, Apple's like, of course, who wants wired? Like, who wants to have like a wired headphone to your thing? Like, the future is gonna be wireless. Of course, that's what a user wants, but they're so used to like the current world right now. Sure, yeah, it's a little bit inconvenient because like most people have wired headphones. But when I saw Apple do like the wireless, like no headphone jack, no thing, and like you don't need a dongle or you have to have a dongle if you wanted the wired thing, I was like, dude, this is like definitely the future. Like I don't know why people are like complaining about it, but yeah, like people complain because it doesn't match their current experience, and but Apple tries to look like a few steps ahead of the current experience, and like
yeah.
what is the ideal experience for a user? And yeah, it's obvious. Like, would you want wires or would you want no wires? Like, obviously, no wires is better.
Yeah, yeah, and we're both using wireless headphones right
Yeah,
now.
right now, yeah.
But yeah, they see it before everybody else, and yeah, even my laptop, if I'm gonna connect it right, I'm connected right now to my monitor. But if I'm gonna connect it, do I want to connect it to my monitor and then have a separate one for power, and then have a separate one for my mouse, and all this stuff?
Yeah.
It's so much better that I only have one thing in my laptop right now, and I think that's the way they knew like what the ideal consumer experience is, and
Yeah.
they just built for that. So
Yeah.
here it's like it's all so many issues. They saw how everybody else messed up first. They
Hmm.
let Meta and everybody go for the first
Hmm.
30% because they knew they were gonna rock everybody when they debuted.
Hmm.
So Meta was made fun of. They had horrible ads. Meta like the reception for their VR and AR stuff was
Hmm.
horrible because their ad was there was some guy who uh, was a failure of a band. Like it was some like bear, right? And then he just failed in all these things in life. And then he could go into the VR world and like pretend like he made it.
Yeah.
and and everybody was making fun of it because it's like,
Oh
wow,
yeah.
this is the most loserish product like you ever they're basically advertising that you're a loser if you use this product, you know?
Yeah. Like
And
escape from reality,
yeah, escape
your
from
sad
reality
reality kind of
and
thing.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then but Apple took all that feedback and they're like, oh, they took the feedback of, oh, it's not human. Like they took everything and they addressed it. They actually did a debut that was good. Like
Hmm.
people, I mean, the first thing you see is not the covering of the eyes, which makes you look not human. They
Hmm.
made it so
Hmm.
that it was so important that you could see the eyes, that they
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
make a screen that makes it seem like they're goggles when in reality that's actually another screen for the outside.
Yeah. Hmm.
But what company is going to say, hey, we're going to do VR goggles, but it's the outside that's important of how people see it when you're using it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's gonna do that? No one's gonna
Yeah.
do that unless you see the end from the beginning. And Apple's the kind of company that actually sees the end from the beginning, and that's why they did that, even though no one was asking for it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely an interesting. Like that was like a very like kind of non-intuitive take that they did, which makes a ton of sense. Like after you see it, like showing the eyes there. Like I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, like I think there's still like kind of like a trade-off you're making there. Like I do still feel like with the goggles, you're kind of like enclosed in your own world, kind of a thing. But at least they're making an attempt at kind of like recreating that human connection, even when people have goggles on, with the
Yeah.
outside world. So I did appreciate that. I think though, like, yeah, I mean, like, have you read some of the reviews of people who have like, or watched some of the reviews of people who've
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
tried it on?
I watched some. Yeah, and then they were just amazed at how polished it is.
Hmm.
Apple's like so good at this, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they've been working on this for 6 years, and like that's why it blows people away.
yeah.
I think if they did like, oh, here's a crappy thing, and then eventually it's gonna be good, guys, come on, like eventually they'll get there, right? But
Yeah.
it doesn't have that blowing away experience where everyone wants to line up and buy the thing that
Hmm.
Apple is so good at if they did that because you're just blown away because it's so polished. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
people can do the basically Meta's problem is you have to click stuff and you have to use
Yep.
a
Controller.
controller and you actually have to reach out to the thing, but that's like very tiring and whatever. But
Yeah.
this one, it's so much it's the better way, which is you look at the thing, then obviously you want to click the thing. And they
Hmm.
knew that. So then they knew that
Yeah.
eye tracking was the way to go, not the controller. So when you
Yeah.
eye track the thing, and they can track your eyes so well, then technically you can click your fingers here or anywhere you want. You can be laying down and just click your fingers, and it'll select the thing. And
Yeah.
that's way easier than using a controller. So yeah, in retrospect, it's like, well, obviously that was the way to go. But now
Yeah.
Meta and everybody else has to play catch up because Apple was doing this in secret for 6 years. So
Yeah.
now like it's going to take years for everybody else to catch up. But by that point, Apple is going to leave them in the dust.
Yeah. I will say like people were making fun of Meta when they were like dumping like billions of dollars into their like the
The VR.
virtual reality, yeah, meta
Yeah.
reality thing. Like people were like, "Why are you guys doing that?" For me, it was like an obvious investment. I think it's actually a good investment that Meta. It's a good bet. I think that they took because for me, it's like it's inevitable. Like it's inevitable that we're gonna move to this AR VR world. Like, of course, like the same thing with the wireless versus wired headphones. Like,
Yeah.
of course, when you're watching a movie, you would want it even more immersive. Of course, when you're playing a video game, you would want it more immersive. So, for things like that, it's like completely obvious to me that like the AR VR world is gonna win as long as we can like execute well on that. And so I
Yeah.
thought it was like a great bet that Meta was placing those bets. But yeah, it seems like, and I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Meta has something like closer, probably not to this caliber Vision Pro, but I bet they have something pretty high caliber, in secret right now that they're working on. That's a lot
Yeah.
better. And then
Yeah.
Meta is also working on more tactile stuff. But I mean, just it's just for me what was most impressive was how far Apple came like already. Like something's going to be launched next year at this quality. Um,
Yeah.
but speaking of, everyone's talking about like the eye tracking is amazing. The video quality like is amazing. They say like John Gruber and Danny Farnwell. He was saying basically like it's not really magical where it's like indistinguishable from real life when you're looking through the lens and seeing your outside world around you. He said
Yeah.
it's not that great, but it's also doesn't feel like you're looking at a screen at all. It's like something in between the two, and so like it's really hitting this new level of like almost reality. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So that I heard is amazing. The eye tracking is amazing, and then the finger tapping to like control is like super like intuitive and amazing. But
Yeah.
one thing I'll say that I've been disagreeing with folks who like John Gruber here, Ben Thompson from the Trajectory, everyone's like questioning the price point. Everyone's like, oh, 3,500, like that's probably just like for the early adopters, and like it's not the mass market price, and they're eventually gonna make a mass market product that's like lower price and things like that. I honestly like my view. I'm curious to hear your
Yeah.
opinion on this. I feel like that is like the mass market price. Like people said the same thing about the iPhone. Like, oh my gosh, this thing's like way too expensive for the average person. Like, who would have bought a phone like that expensive? But for me, it's like I don't know. It's yeah, like
Yeah,
it,
it,
I
yeah,
it's because of right now people like haven't experienced it and they don't have a category, but that 3,500 seems very reasonable. Honestly, it's like two laptops worth basically, right? Like
yeah,
that seems
yeah.
like a pretty reasonable price to pay for like this revolutionary new product that's way more immersive, can make you feel like you're
I
in real
would
life.
say, yeah, I would say what you just said is a very hot take. That is something that no one is saying out there in the internet. Like no one's actually that's a very controversial take that you had. But guess what? I agree with you that that's actually probably correct. Like if you look at what happened with the iPhone, did the iPhone actually get cheaper? People are like, "Oh, well, I pay 30 bucks for a phone. Why would anyone pay $1,000?" But guess what?
Yeah,
It's over $1,000 now. So it's just
yeah,
kind of like in the beginning, people were freaking out when iPhones were 200 bucks, but
yeah.
it's just kind of like it just kept going up, but the value became more and more obvious over time.
Yeah.
So people are saying, "Hey, it's gonna kill it because the price is too high." But the thing is, people just don't see the value. So
Hmm.
I kind of view it as like Neuralink, and if it actually makes you at an advantage, then like how much do people pay for university? That'd be like
Hmm.
$30,000 or more.
Hmm.
They pay a lot for a car. They pay a lot for all this stuff. Why wouldn't they pay for this if it makes you basically like superhuman in your productivity, superhuman in like different ways, or just your experience of like entertainment or just everything? Then
Hmm.
why wouldn't people pay extra for it? And
Yeah.
it just makes sense. It's not like they say I can't afford school or I can't afford a
Hmm.
car or I can't afford different things.
Hmm.
It's just that do they think the value is equivalent to that? And
Hmm.
say there's one person who can't get as much work done because they only have the laptop screen, right?
Hmm.
And they have someone else who, just like the movies, right? They thought the future was going to be like this, and just like the movies, he's like flinging around eight different monitors, and he's telling the computer what to do with his hands. And he gets like maybe two times as much done as a typical person who's bound to a laptop.
Hmm.
Then and he's just giving out commands, voice commands, and the AI just understands what he means, and it's just doing it eight processes at the same time. Then
Hmm.
that guy is gonna get more done than the guy who is on the laptop.
Hmm.
Then what's gonna happen to that guy's salary if he's doing two or three times the work of someone else? The company's gonna pay for your Vision Pro like
Hmm.
easily.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
they're not
Hmm.
gonna care if it
Yeah.
doubles the productivity and like then what's gonna happen? I mean the price is probably gonna go up. So I don't think it's a limiting factor. It's just Apple's playbook. They're
Yeah.
usually ahead of the curve, and people don't know how valuable it is.
Yeah. And,
You know.
I mean, 3,500 is a lot. And especially for, I mean, we live in California, we're in the top 1% of the world, like when you think about the global economy. But even like for me, like growing up, I had friends who, like had food stamps, Um, but like everyone I know, even like the people who aren't like in the, the highest bracket of the highest tax bracket, everyone has an iPhone. Like they're spending
Yeah.
$1,000 for this. Like even like no matter who you are, because it's become that like critical and that important.
Yeah.
So that I feel like I don't know. I could definitely see this even for not just the uber wealthy, but even for your um yeah, like not the highest tax bracket, but like mid tier, like lower tax bracket folks. Also, if there's enough value from this still being a price point that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Like let's look ahead just 5 years, right? AI is going to be even crazier than today, exponentially better.
Hmm.
Computers are going to be exponentially better in all aspects and faster and everything, right?
Hmm.
Then if you're not limited by compute, then what are we really limited by? And we're limited by our ability to even utilize the power of computers and utilize all this stuff. So
Hmm.
then the thing that's limiting us is actually our fingers, the
Hmm.
keyboard. We
Yeah.
can't actually interact with a computer as fluid enough, or we can't. It's just too difficult, right?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think this is the step. It's like it is the future now. where it will allow people to interact and actually make use of that power. And yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see. I do think there's going to be a lot more adoption than people think. This is not like a
Yeah.
niche product.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, we're at 20 minutes, so 10 minutes over than what we wanted to be, but I think we just got carried away and so excited talking about this. I think it'd be interesting to talk about this more. Like, so one, like, we'll stop it here, but maybe like a little teaser for potential future conversations. I know one argument that people have brought up is like, hey, yeah, sure, like I could see 3500 being something, but the phone is something I use way more than this wired headset. I'm probably not going to be walking around town with this wired headset, which I agree with. They probably wouldn't do that at least in the beginning. Um,
Yeah.
but like, and so therefore, like the utility, I mainly use this for entertainment purposes or something like that. I've heard of that. So if you're only using it for entertainment purposes, is it worth 3500? That was kind of like the question posed. But
Yeah.
maybe we could save that conversation and our hot takes for that another time.